How are you? Good. Patty, right? Yeah. Thanks for coming in today. Good. She's good, I'll tell you. I might slide over to the 6:30 planning board meeting in Penfield.
Yeah, I see a Costco.
That's Costco. But I figured if I go, which I really have no desire to go, but at least there's two things. One, I better change my shirt.
Better.
Yeah, two, at least that one I can leave.
You could at least put Post-it note over it.
Why do you need to change your shirt?
Town of Webster,
Not a Webster.
What's wrong with that?
to show it in Penfield planning board meeting. About a very contentious.
Yeah, that's okay. You're fine.
Oh, absolutely. I know, but I was like, no, department head meeting, it's so weird.
I was curious too. I don't have time to know, but I've been on the planning board, so I know what the arguments are
Yeah,
on both sides.
yeah, I'm anxious to hear it.
And Macy's in traffic.
Are we good to go? Yeah. We are. Call the meeting to order. All right, here we go. I will call the meeting on August 8th, Town Board Workshop to order. Tonight we are doing a budget presentation in the first part of our workshop. And Supervisor Flaherty is not able to be with us this evening for a very joyous occasion, actually. His daughter Shaughnessy is a rising senior at Clemson, and her graduation from the ROTC Officer Training Boot Camp was today. She's at Fort Knox. And I don't think that Tom or Molly were really planning to go because Tom thought he had this meeting tonight. But then he found out that she had received a very special honor. It was a peer in camp leadership chosen position. She's been named company commander, which puts her in charge of 180 to 240 other soldiers. So I assured the supervisor that we would be fine without him here this evening. And I just want to extend my congratulations to Shaughnessy on this wonderful recognition and her graduation. So it's a very happy event for the family. The other thing I just want to go over is the whole budget process. And it starts very early. We're always looking at the budgets, and I know the supervisor has been over this. But it starts with the process for 2025 starts in earnest with one-on-one meetings with the department heads and the supervisor and Paul Adams, our financial chief and wizard. And then there's another budget meeting held with the liaison in the supervisor and Paul Adams. Sometimes if necessary, there's a second budget meeting with some of those departments with the liaison, the supervisor, and Paul Adams. So at this point, Supervisor Flaherty has seen these budgets of the departments that we'll be presenting tonight at least 2 times, if not 3. And all of us on the board also have seen the various department budgets that we're liaison to. However, for tonight, this will be the first time I see town clerk, although I've been very involved in the sewer department. Jenny has been involved in the library. Jen is working with the highway department. John, you got communications and information technology. So there are others that we'll be seeing for the first time tonight. So without further ado, I've already wasted 2 minutes of Janine's time. Let's kick it off. And Janine, welcome. It's your first budget presentation after just 30 days in the position. So take it away, Janine.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to start off with the tax collection department. And in regards to personnel, there's no changes to staffing. It's comprised of 2 part-time clerks and 1 full-time tax clerk. For computer equipment and licensing, there's a decrease from last year since we're not foreseeing any need for computer equipment. The $800 is solely for software licensing. For printing and postage, of the $26,725, a total of $13,825 is estimated for reimbursement from the Webster Central School District, which will be posted and realized as revenue when received. For department expenses, This is comprised of office supplies and legal notices, which I'm estimating 50% of those costs to be reimbursed by the school district. For revenue for the tax department, the estimated revenue is $180,000. This is based on historical collection of town and county interest and school interest, which is very difficult to predict year over year. Okay, on to the town clerk portion of the budget. In regards to personnel, there's no change to staffing. It's comprised of 1 full-time deputy town clerk, 1 full-time licensed fee clerk, and 1 part-time receptionist. For capital purchases, they're at $1,500 for office furniture, that's to offer privacy for couples coming in to obtain their marriage licenses. There's a lot of noise and volume concerns with confidential information with the marriage licenses. For computer equipment, I'm requesting replacement of 1 computer without a monitor at a cost of $1,500, with the difference of $2,260 for software licensing. For printing and advertising, this includes legal notices and the cost to update the town code, which occurs twice per year. For postage, in the last year, we've seen the U.S. Postal Service increase their rates 2 times so far during 2024, and we're estimating we will see additional postage increases, so we're adjusting for those estimated increases. For office supplies, with the pricing increases as well, we're seeing a slight increase with our vendors, and we're estimating any of those increases accordingly. For records management, we have a slight increase for services rendered and records management supplies. For machine and computer contracts line item, this includes our general code, laserfiche support, town clerk software for fees and licensing, and copiers, and the postage meter. Subscriptions and publications line item is for e-code, which is found on the town's website, which is where you'll find the town code and the town minutes. For conference and transportation, this will be used for my attendance at the New York State Annual Town Clerks Conference and the Annual New York State Tax Receiver Conference, and also for travel to Monroe County Town Clerk meetings, which are held 2 to 3 times they're held every 2 months. For Easy Passes, sales for Easy Passes have remained flat. There's no increase for that line item. Background checks for peddlers' licenses remains unchanged. And then we're going to go on to revenue. For town clerk fees are comprised of New York State DEC hunting licenses, fishing licenses, marriage licenses, and miscellaneous fees. For return check charges, those are our return fees. We charge $20 for any checks that return for insufficient funds. Easy Passes, there's no change for Easy Passes, that remains flat. Dog control fees are charged to the dog owner when animal control picks up any lost dogs. And for the Webster Central School District tax collection reimbursement, this is where the reimbursement we received from the school district will be posted. For towing permits, there's no change to this line item. There's an increase for games of chance as we are realizing more revenue from these events. On to dog licenses, we continue to partner with Animal Control Officer Barb Hollins, which has helped to increase the number of dogs being licensed in the town. For town clerk fees, this is comprised of peddler licenses of $3,000 and waste hauler refuse licenses at $5,500. And the last item of the town clerk permits consists of special event permits of $2,700 and 1 mobile home park permit of $300. And that is it. Any questions?
Yeah, the only significant increase in your budget overall that I see is the part-time personnel went from 23,000 to 35,000. I'm assuming that's a step increase, Paul?
Yeah.
Okay. Looks very good, thank you.
No, great job. I don't have any questions to me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Denise.
Next, information technology. Steve Peace, come on up.
You're ready, Steve.
All right.
Steve Beese on information technology.
First three lines is payroll. Myself, our system assistant, network administrator, Tom Camille, and our help desk technician, Anthony Sansone. Those are step increases, except for me, I believe I'm just a possible increase. Capital purchases, you see a big decrease in that capital line. We'll get to that towards the end of the budget presentation. Director's training seminar, there's a slight increase in that. With the additional personnel we have, we added an additional license for our online training. Smartphones are pretty flat. Technical support, the cost has gone up. We basically increased the rates. Expenses are flat. Website design and maintenance, that's like the meeting, registration, stuff like that, is Bridget actually pretty much takes care of everything else now. What else we got? Cell tower rent. That's a slight increase. That's where we have equipment up on some cell towers around town for wide area network connectivity to our facilities. So you see that we have an actual decrease in our budget for next year. But that's due to the debt service that the department has. Currently, we have a storage solution that we have financed that we do have to pay for. But then on top of that, we're looking to do a network infrastructure upgrade within all our facilities. After working with Councilman Cahill and Tom, we determined that we could probably, most likely, get the entire thing done all at once for the same cost as trying to break it out year by year and purchasing small pieces. So we're looking at, with our current design and current prices and interest rates, we're looking at trying to finance that. And it would be an additional $68.5 roughly in our debt service. So that's why you see the debt service is actually up to $96,508. That would be what we currently owe plus what we're looking to finance. Right?
Right,
I got that
so
right. Okay.
that you got it right. So the actual installment loan amounts to about 29,000 of this 96,000 that we see. And the rest, about 67 or 68,000 is an estimate at this point, based on research Steve has done.
Yeah, our rough estimate to upgrade the entire organization's infrastructure that's in all of its facilities is roughly $250,000. So we're basically looking to finance that over 5 years, or something like that. So based upon the research for those costs and to these interest rates and things like that, that is the best possible one we can come up with. So that's why our capital purchase line has been decreased so much, because we're trying to find money in our budget to try to keep the purpose budget as reasonably flat as possible, just so they will fit this large project in.
We appreciate that. Thank you.
And that's pretty much for IT. If you got any questions?
No, did a great job with research on the upgrades.
You and Tom were a big help with
Yeah.
working up a way to get that done, because it would have been a 7 to 8 year project if it wasn't
Right.
coming up with solutions.
It's definitely the way to go through all at once.
No, and I appreciate the team effort on that. I would think that when you talk about a 7 to 8 year project, doing it the other way, by the time you get to year 6 or 7, what you've done in year 1 probably needs to be updated already with some of those
Yes,
things.
exactly. By the time we get to the end, we'd have to start all over.
Right,
At least now we'll try to get it all done in 1 year, and then we'll have 4 years of brand new, shiny infrastructure that will eventually be replaced with digital, honestly.
sure.
Roles, but.
Just have to rip the Band-Aid off for the cost of it, but I
Yeah.
think it's a good plan. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, like I said, we did our best to try to get our capital purchases down to try to offset those costs. So the main goal is to try to get the financing at the time that we got to make the purchase to fit within that budget reduction. But
Sure.
it'll be close.
Wonderful,
Thanks,
thank you.
Steve.
Yeah, thank you.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Steve.
Yep, thank you.
And next is Art Tron from the Sewer Department. Where there's a lot happening these days.
Alright, so, first I'd like to thank, because thank a few people honestly, because our budget every year is very involved, and this year was no exception, even a little bit more involved, so I want to thank everyone that helped on this, Rick Neely, Miriam Lamb, Paul, Patty, and Supervisor, to really get this to where it is, and it makes sense both for next year and for many years to come. So we can, with that,
Take it away.
off we go. I'm just going to hit the highlights because obviously there's numerous line items in this budget. We're going to start with the sewage collection system, G8120. Overtime, we did increase that 53.5% due to the fact that with the project we have ongoing, there will be, we expect some coordination with contractors, taking tanks down, bring them back up online, bypassing and so forth. So we're just planning for a little bit more overtime on that. Hopefully it won't come to fruition, but we wanted to get it in there. Compensation on the collection. This will be a new maintenance mechanic. This maintenance mechanic was scheduled for last year, and so we're going to be held off a little bit, and we're going to put it in this year. Capital purchase equipment, that was dropped significantly, as you can see, by $112,000. This has a few small items, and again, we really try to cut back on things that maybe we can move around. We do have some new equipment being purchased with the project, so this was a good place to try to cut back a little bit this year. Vehicle operating lease expenses up 13%. I will say that, and we just had an enterprise meeting today, that I think our vehicles 3 years ago were literally in shambles. They are much more functional now. The guys take care of them. They appreciate driving vehicles that have heat and are much more conducive to working. So they're very, very excited about that, and they're very well taken care of, that I can tell you. Repairs to system, that's up significantly, and the biggest portion of that is going to be doing some heavy cleaning of the main line on Schlegel Road. So we can get in there, and that's the one that's collapsed 2 or 3 times. We're going to do a heavy cleaning on it, then we'll get a camera in there afterwards to see what areas we need to align. But the first step of that is cleaning it, and then we can plan in the future to take care of those bad areas. Wet well cleaning, it's down 41%. We've been doing more of our own wet well cleaning with a new truck, so we were able to back that down with a new flush truck. The village charges are the village charges. Those are for some out-of-district users. The dioxide we zeroed right out. We're not using that. We won't be using it next year. Generator maintenance on the lift stations. So we have 22 pump stations. The majority of them have standby generators. This is just a cost increase to have the general maintenance done on those by an outside firm. We're going to go over to G8130. Again, overtime is up a little bit for the coordination of the project at the plant. Compensation employees, this includes a new wastewater treatment plant operator. jump right down. We got two items there, at 40368 and 40372, ferric chloride and sludge hauling. Again, ferric chloride, we just bid that and the price went up. It just keeps climbing on us, so that's to cover those costs. And the sludge hauling, the sludge hauling did increase a little bit this year, well, going into next year, because we'll be cleaning some tanks, and it is our responsibility to dispose of that. It's actually less expensive for the town to dispose of it than to have a contractor dispose of it.
Art, will we see, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems like the better time to ask the question as long as you're on it.
Yep.
Will we see a decrease in that, that hauling cost once everything is cleaned and the new project is up and running?
We absolutely will, and that was right the premise of, this project. Again, we have no control of the cost. We just bid it. It went up again. We had one response to the RFP, and honestly, Rick and I and Charlie went back and forth with them because it went from what used to be a little, you could have a handshake deal to a point, but now it's a much larger conglomerate that must be running Casella.
Sure.
And it's a hit then and all of that. So absolutely, because right now we're hauling 70 to 80% water,
Mhm.
and if we have to send out the last site fertilizer, it's only 10% water.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
So it doesn't go away, it just gets significantly reduced
it will get significantly reduced. Ideally, it will go away.
completely.
That's our hope. That's our hope. But staying conservative.
Go away completely, not next year, but the following year then?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
How's the dryer building progressing?
They actually just dug for the footers the past 2 weeks. They've been putting rebar in and forms, and they should be pouring, I would think, in the next, without having the schedule in front of me, the next 10 to 14 days.
Excellent, thank you.
Telephone, so not a big number, $4,700, but that went up. I know Mary Ann's been working with Paul and Frontier. These are just charges, and unfortunately Steve left, that they just keep dinging us for all of our stations for copper lines. Prices just keep going up and going up. We're trying to work with Frontier to put in fiber. We've tried 2 stations over the last month. It is very inconsistent. These are for our alarms. So they're working to rectify that situation. Once we get up and going, and I think I had it in last year's budget, was more of a cloud-based system that will tie into our SCADA. I honestly, I did not put it in there this year. There's just too much going on for us to even consider something like that. So we'll stay with the fiber copper lines for our alarms at this point, but the plan is to take those up to a cloud-based system, and it'd be a little less expensive overall, and a lot more user-friendly.
Well, with the entire plant going over to the SCADA system at some point, it seems like it would be wise to hold off on that.
Yes,
Or
well,
being
right.
able to get to that point.
Right, so, the plant is on a SCADA. We've upgraded the SCADA 2 years ago in preparation for this project. And then our VT SCADA is what it's called, the software. It is able to pull in the stations as well. So we plan for that. Computer maintenance, that is just upgrading computers. Lab supplies are down, and you'll see another decrease. The village has decided to no longer use us for their testing, and that is their choice. So with that comes a decrease in revenue, but also a decrease in lab supplies. So buildings and ground maintenance, as we can see, everything is under construction. So we did decrease the cost of that, the line item for that for $5,900. There still are things around the facility that need to be maintained, but we felt that was a good spot to reduce some expenditures. I will jump into this one, 8130-40401, centrifuge preventative maintenance. I did keep that in there, and I will keep that in there until that centrifuge is taken out of service. Because as we all know, or don't know, when that centrifuge goes down, it is very costly. We just had a service on it last year. However, as of 2 days ago, we believe there's another issue with it. So we're going to leave that in there just as the safety net. So, conference in the schools. Again, not a big increase, and I wouldn't normally touch on this. However, this is a kudos to Rick Keneally. Since he's been here, he has really driven us to get involved, and the operators get involved into more education, going to more conferences and things like that. So that is really a kudos to him, and we want to continue doing that.
And also kudos to our employees who've taken advantage of that. We had one last year who was named Operator of the Year,
That's correct.
and one of our other employees received a scholarship
That's absolutely correct.
as a result of all this training.
Correct. So, sewer operation maintenance continued on the next page. So cleaning service and supplies, this is a bit of an estimate that we spoke to the cleaners when we're in our new admin building. Obviously, there'll be more cleaning needed for it. So, and there's Denise Jones calling in. Let's just, I should bring her in. We're going to skip over boiler conditioner and so forth. So we'll go down to 40432, lab analysis. Again, that's sort of driven by the village. So we're not doing much of their work anymore. Industrial pretreatment increased tremendously by $30,000. So per DEC and EPA, we need to do a headworks analysis. That has to happen about every 10 years. The plant hasn't done one in many years. So it's a costly test, has to be outsourced. So we're planning for that. Paul, do you want to go through employee benefits?
Yeah, employee benefits are based on history and expected trends. I have it up year to year, about 41,000, or about 6.3%. So not too bad on the benefit side.
Is that just commensurate with the salary increase?
Yeah, as you add people, as salaries go up, of course, FICA goes up. Workers' comp with New York State retirement contributions. Historically, the employee benefit lines have been budgeted a little too high, so I'm trying to rein that in and get the budget down to where it reflects more where we actually think we're going to end up. So a 6.3% increase, had that been budgeted closer to actual, that would probably be more like a 10% increase. So I'm trying to get it down to reality,
Okay.
which makes it easier to budget.
Thank you.
So we're going to go to sewer operation and maintenance revenue side. First one you're going to see is 02117 high strength organic waste, HSOW. This will be a new revenue line for us. This is a very conservative number. We're hoping to bring that portion of the plant online in late Q3, Q4. So that should drive some numbers for us. Septic waste, that's another one. We haven't been able to take septic waste in probably 3 years due to the state of the facility. So again, Q3, Q4 to try to bring those haulage back.
We should probably talk about Fairlight too.
Yep, let's figure out that one.
Yeah, we've got Fairlight sewer rents in here. This, I think, is conservative. They're saying that they may be online and sending us flow in October of 2025. So we budgeted 900 units, which is, each unit is 60,000 gallons of flow. So the 900 based on what they're saying the flow's gonna be eventually, 2 million gallons a day, this 900 may be very conservative, but since it's unproven, we prefer to stay, reasonable.
Absolutely, and earlier in
See
the
what
year,
happens.
they will be flushing their lines, cleaning tanks, doing some wash down and so forth, so we will get a nominal volume from them early in 2025.
Speaking of Fairlife, does anyone know how they're doing with their schedule based upon what we're predicting?
Actually, yes, I had a call yesterday, and Josh and I are on numerous different calls, but as far as I understand, from their, because we always look at flow on our technical calls and,
Right.
what's constituted in that, as of we know right now, they're still on schedule, unless,
That's my understanding.
yeah.
Which means they think they're gonna have at least one line operating by October of 2025.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. It was made very clear in my call that any deviations from that, they need to share that immediately, and they were all on the same page. Because they understand that, our schedule is paralleling their schedule.
They're making tremendous progress with their construction there.
Well, and I think part of what's keeping all of that on track is there is a weekly meeting with several of the principals in the project, so that everybody is in communication and they know where things stand, and there are no delays because of communication gaps.
There was a decrease in village treatment, and that really goes back to what we spoke to earlier. The village is now outsourcing their, all of their lab testing to a third party. Back to you, sir.
Yeah. Interest earnings increased, rates have been very good, the past year or so. We've been able to earn 5%, 5.2% in that range. They're projected to come down over the next year to 2 years by about 1%. So this number, the 100,000, is conservative. So eventually the rates will come down. So, but I was able to increase it substantially year to year. It was 50,000 and 24. So on the O&M side, we're looking at a rate based on the number of units, 219.77 compared to 297 cents in 2024. On the capital side.
Capital side, building improvements. So, again, we're holding that flat at $5,000. Everything is not being touched at the plant, and there's always something that pops up. So we wanted to hold that line in there. Engineering consultants, that's been $10,000 for quite a long time. It seems that the projects we're getting into, just with residents, proposed sewer projects, the cost or the in-depth that the engineers have to get into is more and more, especially as we start talking with New York State and their attorneys. So just felt it'd be appropriate to bump that up $5,000. Capital improvement pump stations. So this really goes along with what we've been doing the last 7 years, is upgrading our pump stations. Again, antiquated systems. We will be putting in new rail systems. The rail systems we have in some of the stations, you can't purchase anymore. You can't buy pumps that fit them anymore. Paving for Clem Road, that's back in there again. It's just gravel, and the fence is not in great shape. There's also replacement pumps for a couple stations, and just some items that will make the stations run more efficiently and reduce the number of call-outs that our staff has.
Is there an opportunity for grant money there, or what?
No.
No? I thought there was
No, not for things of this nature,
some. Okay.
unfortunately. Capital improvements collections, These are repairing problem laterals, spotlighting leaks in the systems, things like that. It's so that we increase that $10,000 again just due to cost increases. And capital purchases buildings, we dropped it down $9,000.
With all of the work that's being done, do you really need $31,000 for building improvements, since there's so much construction going on there?
And that's a great question. Remember, they're really not touching the buildings, they're touching the infrastructure in the buildings. But we did reduce it $9,000. You know, there are roofs, there are windows, there are numerous garage doors, garage door openers and things like that that still need to be maintained that are original, 50 years old. So we felt it prudent to at least keep some money in there at this point.
Okay.
But again, great question. You think that everything's being touched, and it isn't.
Thank you.
On the debt service side, the total debt service cost for principal and interest is going up fairly substantially year to year, up about $1.1 million. We'll be closing on a bond anticipation note renewal at the end of August for about $35 million. A year ago, we borrowed $33,500,000, so we're only increasing it $1.5 million, and the reason for that is because we got a $20 million grant from New York State. So that grant is saving us substantial amounts of money in principal and interest over the eventual term of the serial bond. We actually got a very good rate. I originally had forecasted a rate of 3.75% in the tentative budget, but yesterday or Tuesday when the rates came in, they're going to pay us a band premium, which lowers the rate. So when you net everything down, I think the rate was 4%, but after the premium it was 2.936%. And our consultant, Municipal Solutions, said that's the best rate they've seen this year. So we get the gold star for the best interest rate. Our timing was perfect because we had that little couple of day financial market scare.
Yeah.
And that's exactly when our band sale took place. And it actually helped us.
Lucky.
Wow.
It's always,
Lucky day.
it's
It was
always
incredible
great.
timing, actually.
Yeah, it's always great when you bring us that news. Thank you.
Right. So that's where we stand on debt service. Transfer to other funds. This $40,000 for the conveyance pipe, that's just our share for expenses that occurred before the bond resolution was passed. So we'll be transferring that in. I did budget a substantial amount, $540,000 to be transferred in the sewer capital reserve. And that's because we have substantial revenue on the books for 2025. The biggest piece is this $2,190,000 for the industrial commercial use charge. And that's actually the entrance fee that Coca-Cola Fairlife will owe to the town. It actually amounts to $21,900,000. We're striking a deal with them for it to be paid over 10 years. So this is the first installment, which is set to be paid in July of 2025. The company, Fairlife, will also be reimbursing us for 96% of the debt service cost on the conveyance pipe project. So that amounts to $770,000. So overall, our revenues are up. When you include both the capital and the O&M side, our revenue is up about $3 million, or 232%. Our expenses are up, but our revenue is up even more, which is actually driving the rate down on the capital side. The rate expected to be $43.16. Last year was $98.17.
And certainly this is testament to what we've we've been talking about with the project being, it's such a high cost. But we're looking at certainly substantial revenues from this.
Right.
And both agreements with Coca-Cola on both the conveyance pipe and the
Entrance fee.
the entrance fee is set. But the flow is the other one that we've been working on. We hope to actually have a resolution next week to put those in place. And everyone has been working overtime between both Coca-Cola, Fairlife, and the town on getting these set, and I think we're getting closer to that. I know that people are anxious to see those things signed, but both sides want to be sure that they are airtight and respect both sides of those who are signing. So it's been a lot of work, but we will get there, and hoping it happens by next week, but we're not going to do it if it's not right.
What's interesting, the New York State grant that we received, awarded to us by Governor Hochul for $20 million, that actually saves the town about $1,400,000 over a 30-year period, each year for 30 years.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a big saving to this project.
Yes, thank you.
Any questions?
I had a question. You talked about the industrial pretreatment and it was going up $30,000 and you mentioned it was just something that needed to be done. My question was on the timing. With some of the other increases in the budget, is that time sensitive? Does that have to happen in 2025?
It does, yeah, it does have to happen. It is driven by regulatory agencies,
Okay.
and they're requesting it.
And then the cleaning, I guess, that went up like 61%.
61.29, correct.
And you mentioned it's just a bigger space, is it really that much? Is it? Yes.
We don't know. So again, until the building is finished, we won't know what the actual cost is. We worked with the cleaning company to try to get some ideas of what it is. So to put it in perspective, the sewer department never had a cleaning service up until 4 years ago. We were cleaning it ourselves. So what we don't want to do is have a new facility and not take care of it. Again, we should hopefully dial those numbers in by the end of the year, once the building is up and occupied.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
No. Thank you, Art.
Thank you, Art. It's been a
Sorry.
very detailed and constantly moving project and projections. Appreciate it. And Paul, thank you for all your hard work on that as well. We are, let's see, we're still running ahead of schedule. That's great. So next up we have the Webster Public Library. And Adam, take it away.
Will do. Thanks, Patty. Good evening, everyone. Just as a quick preamble, Patty had asked me to do a little explanation of how the Webster Public Library is a little bit different from most of the other departments in the town. We have a appointed library board appointed by this board, which acts as the fiduciary agent as part of the library. As preparation for this meeting, I had to take a draft budget to them for their line item approval in April of this year to prepare it to be ready to bring to the town board, obviously. So we're supported primarily through the tax dollars from Webster, but we also have two separate 501c3s that support us, the Friends of the Webster Public Library, which, if you're familiar with our library, we have a bookstore that they run just inside the library. So far this year, they've been able to raise $40,000 for us, which is a big win. We're eternally grateful for their energy and efforts. And then the foundation, which manages a small endowment of about $500,000 as of the large donation that we received last year. And that interest gets spun off to fund special projects that might not otherwise be funded through our operational budget.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted you to add some color to that because, as you said, your department is different. And I think a lot of people don't understand all of that. So I appreciate you refreshing people's memories.
My pleasure. And I could go on and on about library for probably
I'm
longer
sure,
than anyone wants to be
I'm sure
here.
you would. That's why you're so great.
Into the budget. First three line items are all salary dollars. The biggest change you'll see here is under salary personnel. There's two changes here. What you'll notice is that, I'm just going to go down to the hourly for a second. You'll notice a decrease despite the library, much like Parks and Rec, being highly affected by the increase in minimum wage. So even though we have a minimum wage increase, which amounts to about a 3.3% increase, which I extended to all library personnel in the hourly category, I took two, prior to me joining Webster Public Library, there was a full-time position that was then split into two. We tried that for 2 years, and the ability for us to cover the service desks, as well as the flexibility that we need for someone who does off-hour and weekend work, has not been conducive to the part-time position. So I took two part-time positions that had been previously carved out from a full-time position and moved that into the salary personnel. So that is one of the salary personnel changes that makes up for that rather large increase. The other is a new full-time librarian. So as it stands, we have two full-time librarians that serve the Children and Youth Services Department, and we have one full-time librarian that is part of the Adult Services Department, and the rest is made up from part-time staff. I posit that our primary demographic is people who have a lot of free time, so that can be caregivers, retirees, etc., as well as young families. And that gap in service is really something I'm trying to address. Our programs is something we're known for at Webster. In fact, we've had double-digit increases in our foot traffic year over year since I've been a part of the library, and I'd like to continue that good work because we do have a very loyal audience. So that amounts for the increases in the salary personnel. And then the other increases there are COLA. We've adopted the 2% COLA of the town. And then there are three people in the salary personnel, as well as myself, who are still receiving steps. And as a reminder, the library's precedent here is that steps are only a 1% increase, unlike the town steps. So, it helps keep our overall figure down, although it may also hurt our retention. Moving along, the equipment purchases went up about $1,000. We've been using that to update our lighting. Our next capital equipment purchase that we will probably try to address is our security camera system. Those prices continue to go up, and so we're trying to outfit that in a way that we can more effectively use our security system. Our automation capital, this is the line we use to purchase computers. As you've heard all the other department heads say in the past two meetings, costs for computers are going up. That particular line has been flat for almost 10 years at $10,000. I'd like to increase that to $15,000 to help get better machines as well as take care of our aging technology that's equipped with our rooms. So think projectors, think TV monitors that go into our study rooms, that kind of thing. Excuse me. Moving down, we've got a handful of flat line items. So the membership and notices, this is our membership to the New York Library Association. This did go up 33%. That's just something that we've got to stay plugged into. I think that you'll find in a slight update I've got at the revenue side that it's worth the money, but that did go up significantly. As a reminder, or for those of you who are newer to our budget, Paul and I did separate out our building rent expense, which is our contractual rent in our lease, which is a fixed cost along with escalations. I think we have 1 or 2 left before the end of the lease in 2032. So that's the 4329 line, building rent expense. And then we did separate out the building common area charges and taxes. That's a variable expense. So that really goes back to how much tax the landlord is paying proportional to our square footage, as well as any improvements they do to the shared property. And we take a best guess at that. It really depends on needs repair and that kind of thing.
And of course, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is one of the downsides, and we've talked about this at length, of us being a tenant in that
Yes.
plaza. It's not ideal. I was not here when that decision was made. The library actually used to be in this building many, many years ago. I'm sure at the time it made sense, but as the years have gone on, it's really a tremendous part of your budget that it would be nice to be relieved from. So I know as we look towards the end of that lease, it's something that you're trying to plan for the future.
Absolutely.
And I think that we all recognize that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a significant increase. I think about $90,000 of that is taxes that we wouldn't otherwise be paying. And I just want to say, I think I've said that at previous budget meetings, but Councilman Cahill, I'm really indebted to the work that you did prior to me coming on in terms of investigating that lease, because it helped me not reinvent the wheel, but also try and give me some focus on how to prepare for the future. Moving along, we do have, so I think I've made it pretty plain. I'm trying to get our library materials. This is line 530. Library materials, these are the books and the movies and et cetera that we loan out. I'm trying to get us up to comparison with our peer libraries. Those are the other large suburban libraries in Monroe County. They're all spending about $200,000. We were at $100,000 when I started. This is again another downside to having the lease, is that our building expenditures are significantly higher than our peer libraries. But I am trying to rebuild that, and that will help us increase our circulation. So I've been kind of slowly plodding along with a $10,000 increase each year. Next one is natural gas. That's the other big change. RG&E and the Public Utility Commission, Public Service Commission approved the RG&E rate hikes that we're all dealing with at home. We're dealing with that ourselves. So you'll see an increase in natural gas. And we always hope to come in under that. We did, through a foundation project, install new thermostats and new sensors that try to get a better handle on this big warehouse space. As many of you probably heard me say, like, this is where I did my shopping when I was a kid in school. It's an old Ames building. It wasn't built to hang out and read a book and take a class. So hopefully we can come in under that. The next line you'll notice, I'm estimating that our electric will be down significantly because of all the LED upgrades we've done. That's thanks to the foundation as well as Assemblyman Mantelo. We're down 25% year over year so far this year, and we just finished the final phase of that project in July. We've replaced 634 lights in the library, all over to LED. And this last phase was the second largest, so we should be seeing a significant rebate from RG&E as well as a decrease in energy usage. Obviously, that's competing with RG&E's rate hikes, but we're down pretty significantly so far. So I'm hopeful that we will come in quite under.
Was that a grant that Assemblyman Mantelo secured for you?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's a grants and aid. And I'm happy to say that Assemblyman Mantelo and Senator Group have committed another $30,000 to us this year.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah. Moving on, we're going to employee benefits. Paul, do you want to take a stab?
Yeah, I have employee benefits up about 24,000 year to year, which is about 7.4%. So once again, it's based on history and the trends that we see in the future. And the number of employees, of course.
So moving down to the revenue side, I think I mentioned before, shortly after I started, We changed over our vendor for printing, and we're getting an actual accounting of how much revenue we're bringing in, which we were not receiving before. I'm pleased to say that I think we'll actually exceed this $9,500 in revenue, but again, I want to be conservative and not shoot for the moon and fall down there. Also, our library card replacement fees, that's been adjusted. It looks significantly up. It's actually adjusted to actuals of what we're seeing this year. Billings for replacement and lost books, again, that's just an adjustment to actuals. Interest and earnings, thanks again for Paul for your help on this. We saw a significant increase in our interest, both because of the rates and because of the strategy we're using to try and prepare for the end of the lease. So our fund balance is up significantly, and so we're realizing some additional interest there for revenue. Unclassified revenue is, we're estimating at $600. It may go up, but because we're adding a new amenity to the library's budget, but it will flatten out. It will be a cost neutral thing. So I expect that our unclassified revenue will actually be higher, but it will end up being cost neutral. And then the only other thing, back to my comments about the NILA increase of $250. Some of you may know I am the chair of the New York State Library Association's Legislative Committee, and we had a really good year this year. And so our state aid is actually not going to be the $12,500 that you see printed, but $13,988 this year. So we got to win there.
I'm sorry, 13,000.
988.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's up about 14.8%. And that would, just so you don't need to all do the math yourselves, that would bring the inter-fund transfer revenue, that 2.544 million number to 2.543. So it's down about $1,500. Any questions?
Could you just reiterate your $106,312 increase in personnel for employees?
On the salary line?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
You added one librarian and then one salary person you bumped up?
Yep, that's right.
And did you attribute that, part of that, to an increase in attendance?
So partially, yes.
Okay.
So we had the increase in attendance, and also I took, there were 2 part-time positions in the part-time line that I combined into a full-time position. So that's also, part of it's being moved from the hourly to the salary line as well. And then there is one FTE increase.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you track your attendance at the library?
We have a door counter, so we've got like an IR camera, and it can count, it actually can count what it thinks is an adult or a child even.
Right.
And so we track traffic in and traffic out.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so we've had, like I said, I think it averaged 13.2% over the last year.
That's great.
In July, we almost hit 20,000, which is a little shy of 2019 numbers, so pre-COVID numbers.
It has nothing to do with the kids running back and forth with this, right?
I mean, they did that in 2019 too, so. They love that door opener, let me tell you that much.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
Thank
all
you.
I
I
have.
have no questions.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. We spent time in the library together, and as a new board member, and you took me through a lot of this. Much of it is familiar. It'll be nice when we can have our own library and not have to
Yes,
rent
it
the
will.
space, for sure.
Yes, especially you do have a lot of, events and stuff like that too for the kids. My granddaughter just loved the library, so.
Oh, we love her there too.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anna.
And now we have 2 public works presentations. The first will be Josh Artuso with Community Development.
I think you're gonna do it together.
Well, we're doing it together, all right. And Keith Mortimer, our new town engineer. It's the Josh and Keith show.
All right. Good evening. So we're gonna like they said, this is kind of, we have a combined budget between Josh and I, so we're gonna tag off of each other on areas that we each have respective jurisdiction over. So the first one is building maintenance. That falls underneath the engineering department. You'll see that I'll highlight some of the big increases here. First one is going to be the capital improvements. You'll see we're going from 20,000 to 205,000. So just some background on that. We are, the previous town engineer and her assistant engineer developed a 5-year capital improvement program to address maintenance and items that are on our campus between the town court and the town hall and the police department. And to that end, they had come up with a total capital of somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million, and this includes anything from HVAC replacements to just things that have come to their end of their useful life, whether that's the generator that's for the town hall building, and some other items that we just know that we've got to address here over the next 5 years. We'll be taking a hard look at that list as we go into 2025, but we do know that they had identified some top priorities, and we will take those on here immediately. So this $205,000 includes about, it does include about $20,000 of just general improvements, so that's what we had from last year. Those are sort of the unforeseen situations. The other 3 items that make up this is about $40,000 to seal and stripe the town parking lot, another $20,000 to replace the retaining wall that is behind the town hall generator, and then the big item is $125,000 to upgrade the elevator in the town hall building. That is, most of the components to that elevator are obsolete and no longer fixable. So we're going to do a complete overhaul of that elevator and get it back up to not only code, but also to make it operational.
The plan is to use appropriated fund balance to pay for these one-time expenditures. I've appropriated $910,000 in the general townwide fund, which these costs, including the facility assessment, which Keith will talk about in a minute, within that $910,000. And this also helps the town come in line with our fund balance policy. The fund balance, unappropriated fund balance in the general townwide fund is running a little high compared to the policy, so this just helps rein it in and helps us get some things done that we need to have done.
I have to say that I had an injury a few weeks ago where making steps rather difficult. And for the first time in 15 years, I took the elevator at Town Hall, which I was feeling just fine about until I got a preview of the budget and saw that we were doing work on the elevator, and then I was a little more concerned with taking that elevator. So,
We keep it running.
yes, you do.
We are keeping it running, but as I understand, previous assessments by the, by Mary, the town engineer, and it had gotten to the point where it's become more and more expensive to
Right.
fix and maintain.
And I do remember some maintenance issues with that over the years, so.
Down for a while.
Has anybody gotten stuck in there?
Does it have to be inspected annually?
It is.
Okay. And it's passed its inspections?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We're trying to, like I said, I understand that we had it was down for a significant amount of time because of the inability to get the parts for it, so.
Yeah, I heard of signs in the parking lot telling people that if they needed to be on the upper floor, they had to park around the front, and it was a mess.
Yep. So we're working through that. We've budgeted $125,000 for that elevator. We're are working with our service agreement contract that does the work on the elevator now these days. And actually, we're looking at costs that may come in below this, but we're running conservative, just given where costs seem to be headed. The other large item here to talk about is the facility assessment. So I think everyone has heard, or maybe has heard, about the HVAC systems that we have throughout Town Hall, Town Court.
You can literally hear it.
Yeah, yeah. And there's actually, and in my discussions with the rec center folks, they also have some aging systems over there that need replaced. So what we've identified is, so that we understand what we're dealing with, is to actually have a mechanical engineering firm come in and do a complete assessment of our HVAC systems and help develop almost essentially, I'll call it a mini master plan and an approach on how we can keep the systems running that we have, but also then replace them and upgrade them accordingly. You know, for example, I know that over in the town hall, our HVAC system is a cobbed together bunch of residential heaters, furnaces, and AC units, and we want to make sure that we don't just go out and start replacing those at $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 a pop. But I want to make sure that we can do a more comprehensive, maybe improved approach to how we do that work. So these are this is costs in there to assess these systems and to give us a plan to move forward and how to spend money appropriately.
And I'm sure as we start to look at replacing those, we're going to certainly see savings and efficiency and operations of newer units
Oh,
that are more appropriate.
We did something similar to this a few years ago. We had a company come in and assess a lot of our equipment and put together a plan.
Don't remember.
I'm unaware of that.
I think you're referring to the HVAC maintenance contract that we have with Monroe Piping.
Right.
Um,
The first step I thought in that contract was them coming in and putting a full assessment together. So are we doing this all over again?
No, what they did, basically inventory of what existed at all of the town facilities. They never really took it to the next level, as was originally envisioned.
So having that in hand, is that something we could turn over to the company that we're selecting or we select to come in so they have that information? So that's a lot of due diligence that they don't have to do?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we would provide them with that inventory.
And then just finally, one comment I'd like to make on the maintenance line here of $40,000. We would envision that as we are addressing some of these issues that we have here, whether it's the elevator or the generator, repair, retaining wall, and many other items, that this extra $40,000 we would hope to either keep steady or actually see a decrease in this line item going forward.
With respect to the maintenance line, and, you know, is that something, some monies that we could put forward for like replacing tiles? Those sorts, there's still broken tiles.
Broken tiles.
In the entryway, you're walking through, the grout is not where it should be, so you can feel the tipping.
Right. And we absolutely can.
Okay.
I do believe that probably, from what I observed from underneath those floors, that those tiles have been laid over a plank floor. And so
That's a problem.
And so there's the issue. So I don't know if that's the actual fix,
Right.
but yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Nope, that's okay. The town hall building has some unique construction aspects to it.
It sure does.
All right. I think that's all I had to preview on that one. Everything else is pretty status.
the budget for the fire marshal's office, which is under community development. The first line item being overtime, that's for when the fire marshal and deputy fire marshal need to respond to emergencies that are occurring after hours. If there's a house fire, an accident, they also respond to support the police department in cases of hoarding situations. So that's what that overtime is for. The two salaries are obviously governed by the union contract. We did have a slight increase in the computer equipment and licensing, as we are going to be purchasing an additional computer so that we have Windows 11 prior to Windows 10 becoming obsolete. The capital purchase, vehicle accessories, that's actually directly related to two line items down, which is the purchase or the replacement of one of our oldest fleet vehicles. We're following the enterprise multi-year plan of replacing our vehicles. So this year, we would be replacing the fire marshal vehicle, which is a 2016 Ford, with a more modern vehicle. And then the capital purchase vehicle accessories is basically outfitting that vehicle with the radio equipment, antennas, lights and sirens that the fire marshal's vehicle requires. So there is an increase in the lease expense for this year, and will now reflect 2 vehicles instead of 1. We've kept pretty much everything else flat in terms of the training and supplies. We did up the fuel cost slightly based on rising fuel prices. Are there any questions on the fire marshal's portion of the budget?
Question on the revenue with the fire inspection fees, that's kept flat between 24 and 25. Yet, in the part-time personnel, there's a note about inspections are up due to the town taking on Xerox. They used to have their own fire marshal, and additional multifamily buildings and businesses, yet you're not expecting an increase in revenue for that?
Oh, that's a good point. I believe that the note is a leftover from a prior year's
Okay.
budget ask.
Okay.
We have seen an increase in the number of fees that we are, that we are charging for the annual operating permit for certain types of businesses and establishments. But I think we base that number on current projections, which are tracking right about the same as this current year.
Thank you, that explains if it's a leftover number.
But we are charging Xerox for inspection fees, correct?
Yes, because we are now responsible for those buildings.
This one I can take on. So, a change to this that's not been, that's new to this particular evening of budget. We are pursuing our construction inspector position, which is a part-time position. So that is the first line. So that is showing that we were not anticipating it for 2025, but we are now we will be putting that back in, assuming we have a suitable candidate, and hope to bring that person online as soon as possible, given workload. I would also say we would probably move over the $1,000 for the potential for overtime as well. The dollar values there for staff are just what they are as far as step increases and cost of living increases. We are anticipating adding any more staff We do have a vacant position also within that line for a GIS person. We'll keep that in there for now, however, we may forego filling that position in light of another item here at a lower level that I'll talk to. Everything else on this section of the budget is fairly consistent. Minor changes here and there just reflect, accrual as of 2024 and projections, but so there'll be some ups and some downs, but everything is fairly flat. The one item I'll point out before we move too far is the record management. So we are slowly trying to get ourselves to be paperless and to reduce down the amount of hard copies of plans and books and things that we have. So we have identified 50,000 for scanning. And that would be scanning not only a lot of the items that are in the Sandbar library, but also those that might be in our archives as well. Just getting these items electronic makes retrieval of the information easier and more expeditious, quite frankly, when we're trying to address residents' concerns and issues that they may have, and we need to pull back some historical information about what has occurred in and around their area that they might be talking about.
For anyone who has spent any time in the Sandbar Library, they would realize that that's a very good expenditure of funds.
Is that for outsourcing scanning or buying scanning equipment, like an engineering size scanner?
Yeah, for outsourcing, we would outsource that. We started doing a little bit of assessment or looking into this. We realized that we can probably scan somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper for $3,200. So if you want to think about that, it's a standard size bookcase full of binders and SWIFT reports and engineering reports. So but we just don't have the equipment nor the manpower to do that internally. And these folks that do this on the regular have the ability to quality control and then deliver these items back to us electronically. Our idea is that most of these items, once they're scanned, we no longer will keep the hard copies. Then we'll just maintain them electronically. And then finally, the other large item, go down to 40332, GIS Engineering Services. So we have, this is a little bit of a concern that has arisen. As I mentioned, our GIS person, our position is vacant. That person resigned about a month into the job. Not quite sure what their concerns were, but they certainly did not last. We've also had some previous experiences with trying to get our GIS system updated and assets completely documented and accurate. And we think the best approach here is to step back and have a consultant, a firm come in that does GIS, that come in and get ourselves up to a solid base with our assets in the system itself. We're guessing it's a $100,000 endeavor, but we're unsure at this point. The other aspect of this is we just went through our EPA audit, EPA DEC, and there are going to be subsequent requirements as being an MS4 town, where our mapping has to be more and more accurate and more complete or thorough in what we're maintaining. So it's challenging to hire the right candidate to probably take us to the level we need to take our system to at this point. We reached out, we did advertise for this position, and we got a fair number of candidates or potential candidates, but most of them came in with either very little education, a class or two in GIS, and no experience, or some ad hoc experience meshed with some education, but nothing robust enough to get us to where we need to go. So we're going to try to take a different approach with this, and in 2025 really get our GIS database up to snuff, and something that we can then work with and maintain going forward.
There's a substantial increase in inspection and engineering fees revenue. I believe it was toward the end of 2023, Coca-Cola Fairlight paid us, I think it was $1.3 million as a fee at the start of the construction project. That revenue is being recognized over about a 2-year period, and about $400,000 of that is going to fall into 2025. We did not budget for it in 2024.
Okay. For the building department, there really hasn't been much change in terms of personnel. Still holding the same employee count from 2024. You will notice that there's a slight increase again in the computer equipment and licensing line. Again, that's associated with our computer upgrades so that we are in a good position when Windows 10 is no longer supported by our IT department. The other notable increase that you'll see is in the town code compliance line. So we've upped that quite a bit for next year, as we've been taking a more aggressive approach to remedying code violations. These are things that either vacant homes, vacant properties that are not being kept up. We do have a vendor that we authorize to go cut the grass or do cleanups of properties, and then an invoice is sent out to the owner of record from our finance department. If they do not pay, that money then goes on to a tax lien. So it needs to be recognized in the budget as an expense, but ultimately the town does recoup its money over time in this line. Everything else pretty much remains flat from this current year. So if there's no questions or comments on building, I'll just go right into the zoning board of appeals. Again, these are the stipends that are given to each of the zoning board members for their attendance at the meetings. 50% of the recording secretary's salary is funded in this part of the budget, the other 50% being under the planning board. And then, of course, the deputy town attorney to the board is also accounted for in here. The town attorney to the board, I think that's when additional outside potential assistance or additional legal support is needed, but I think we've eliminated that for next year, as the town will be selecting a firm moving forward. So we're not anticipating the need for additional legal support above and beyond what's currently being provided.
Yeah, the attorney costs may end up switching from salaries to a contractual fee, which we pay to the law firm. But
Right, and I
We'll see
just,
how it shakes out.
I just want to remind everyone that we're looking at that because of our current town attorney, Genesi's expected retirement at the end of the year.
On the revenue side of things, we've slightly reduced the zoning fees based on current projections.
District.
And then going into the planning board, it's much like the zoning board, the compensation for the board members, the other 50% of the recording secretary's salary, and again, the attorney that assists that board. We have upped a little bit of mileage, as we've noticed that members are more regularly claiming reimbursement mileage for their site visits. Slight increase for the signage, and those are for the property under review signs that you see for projects that are going before any of the boards. Another notable expense in this portion of the budget is the master plan expense. So that is the anticipated cost for the comprehensive plan update that the town is going to embark upon. However, that will be offset with the $100,000 grant that we were awarded from New York State. However, we do have to show the master plan expense followed by the revenue to help offset that.
Right. The employee benefits, I have up about 33,000 year to year, or about 8.7%. On the revenue side, there is some sales tax revenue that gets charged to this fund. 12% of the overall Monroe County sales tax revenues here. I've got it at 804,000. And I've increased interest earnings to 45,000, up from 20 the previous year, as the rates have been good. Still think the 45 is relatively conservative, so it's a safe number to put in. So overall revenues are up about 24,000. Other revenues. So this particular fund, I actually have the amount to be raised by taxes coming down to zero. I've done that with sales tax revenue and the use of appropriated fund balance. Zeroing it out, along with zeroing out the highway part-town fund, allows us to allocate sales tax revenue to the general townwide fund, which helps offset some of the debt service costs related to the highway building project. You'll hear a little more about that when Pat gives you this highway budget presentation in a few minutes.
Very good, thank you. Does anyone have any other questions for Josh?
Thank you.
Just going back to the GIS with the GIS services, when you talk about GIS assets and MS4 town mapping, what does that entail? Describe to me what gets mapped from a GIS perspective.
Sure. So anything that is what they call an outfall, so anything, so if you have a pond where the water outfalls from that pond has to be mapped. We have to map location, elevations. We would be, part of this would also be us establishing or reconfirming our manhole information.
That's all the MS4 stuff?
Well, that's,
Or
it would be all the town stuff, but the mapping for the count for MS4, I know outfalls is one of the big ones that we have to be a part of. I could get you the other information as well. I don't have enough.
Okay, that would be great.
And
Great.
I'll just add that there are areas of town where we're completely missing information altogether, the locations of stormwater pipes and grates and things of that nature. So I'm assuming that that would also filling in the gaps in parts of town where we simply have no information at all.
Okay.
This has been an ongoing issue for almost as long as I've been on the board in trying to complete this GIS information. I know that somewhere a long time ago, I think we contracted with perhaps one of the engineering firms in town to do some part-time work on getting this up to date. Do you remember that, Josh?
I've heard of that,
Okay.
that before my time, but yes, my understanding is there's been a couple efforts. I know a couple summers ago, we utilized
Some
our interns
Right,
and the aero unit that our department purchased.
yes.
So we have been making progress over time, but I think this will allow us to really take a big step forward.
Right. I think we've been working on it, but because it's been so piecemeal, that we really haven't made the progress that we had hoped for. And I think with a dedicated effort, hopefully we can bring everything up to speed.
Yeah, and what we're finding, I know, I speak for both Josh and I, what we find is there is a big interest by the community to have access to a public facing GIS. So we've been reluctant, we have a draft version of that sort of sitting back, but we have been reluctant to release it for fear that some of the information is not accurate.
Sure.
There's just becoming a bigger and bigger demand for this information to be available, so we need to kind of step back before we step forward, and then really take a solid step forward in getting our database up to date and up to, like I said, up to snuff. So kind of put this step behind us and then bring someone on eventually to help us maintain it, as well as for Josh's group in the planning side to be able to use it as an actual research and analysis tool.
Thank you.
Going forward.
Okay.
No other questions? Thank you, Josh and Keith.
Thank you, Josh.
Yes. And we are 5 minutes ahead of schedule. Pat? Next up, we have the Highway Department. Pat Stevens is our Highway Superintendent, so Pat and Paul, take it away.
Perfect. Good evening.
Highway Department.
Good to see everybody again. All right, we can jump right into it. If you wanted to jump on the GIS thing, but I'll hit that when we get to drainage because it does kind of overlap. And there's a few additional things that the EPA is asking for. There's a new general permit this year that the DEC put out. It was effective January 1st, and they have an entire schedule for the next 3 years to become compliant with that new permit. And there are some more stringent things. One of them is the mapping. We have a great base of that. There's some specifics, so I'll touch on that when we get to drainage because there's some adjustments. And I also don't want to talk a whole bunch about stuff that's not in my budget. So,
Okay.
so we right into it. The general fund, townwide first section. I'm going to kind of move things and try to hit on some of the highlights and the things that might have changed a little bit. Give a general overview. If there's any specific lines in there that anybody has any questions about, please interrupt as we go on, because there's a lot of stuff here, so I don't want to miss anything that anybody's interested in, so please just interrupt me anytime, not a problem. So the first sections there are salaries, mine and our white collar staff. Those are per the current contracts. There's new white collar contracts in place that dictate those adjustments, and then as well as the non-union salary schedule that was put together this past year and voted on. That reflects what's happening there. If there are increases, these are all merit increases, they're not guaranteed, but we do budget for them. Then it gets into compensation, overtime, things of that nature. There's minor increases again based on those budgets. The COLA adjustments and things of that nature is what you see from increases there. Capital improvements to the building, we took that down just a touch because I'm really hoping that with the new facility coming online,
our operating budget for the buildings is gonna go down significantly, because there will not be as many items in disrepair that need to be addressed. So we took it down a little bit this year, but hopefully it goes down a lot in years to come, very soon. Security monitoring, training, cleaning, things of that nature down through there, just been generally increased to factor in material costs and labor through those sections. Some minor adjustments on the utilities front, natural gas. We've seen a slight underutilization of that line, so we dropped it down slightly to reflect the past year. So in general, that section is moved up slightly in relation to salaries and general direction. So let me right over, getting to street lighting and signals. There's the street lighting districts that do exist, that are paid for. Generally, the increases here are due to material and labor. We do outsource the road striping, which is the biggest line in there, actually to the county. The county has their own program that does that currently, and we've seen those costs go up significantly in the last few years, and they've attributed that to literally the cost of paint and then the same labor increases that we see with our staff. So that's the majority of the increase there. On to off-road drainage. This is a small portion of our drainage program that has to do with certain pipes and conveyances along the roadways, but outside of them. It's a very small portion of our drainage program. We're lucky to have a dedicated drainage fund where we do most of our drainage projects out of. So this is a small portion of items, and those have just been adjusted to reflect what are currently seen as the general labor increases and minor increase and things of that nature for our relationship with the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition. That jumps us right into the Highway Townwide Fund, which is one of the more active and complex funds that we have. It contains one of our largest items, which is equipment. So there's some general increase for employee compensation, again, in alignment with the contractual situations that have been negotiated and put in place. That's the labor. Then it gets into purchases for CHIPS equipment. Last year we had opted to not have any of the CHIPS funding. The CHIPS funding is the funding that comes from the state to us in various different pots for different improvements that we do. It's become relatively significant. It's between $200,000 and $400,000 a year that comes out of that program. It's a great program. We spend some time trying to talk to our local politicians and going to Albany and stuff to make sure that fund goes on. It's a big factor what we do.
This is a new account.
Yeah.
We decided to be smart to isolate the CHIPS equipment rather than mix it in with all the other equipment we're buying. Makes it a little simpler to track against the revenue that we're budgeting.
Correct. It's a little cleaner. Previous to this line, if we wanted to spend CHIPS money for equipment, it would come out of the equipment line. So it was difficult to line up the revenue lines. Now there's a CHIPS line that shows the income from the state as a revenue line that matches the CHIPS equipment expense line. So it can be better defined that amount of CHIPS money is for equipment in this section. Then the big item, the purchases of equipment. In there we have the tandem dump trucks. I believe there's one in there currently. We are looking at purchasing a vac truck this year, similar to what the sewer department uses. It has become more and more apparent that with all the utilities in our right of way, when we go to do a repair, hydro excavation is almost always needed. We're doing it on a regular basis to avoid fiber communications, various gas lines. When you go in these right of ways now, you call it the Dig Safe ticket, the 811. The right of way is full. It's becoming more and more full. Green light, fiber, all of these types of things in the right of way. So we find this is a very effective way to do it. It'll also allow us to take a more aggressive approach to our catch basin maintenance and cleaning. It works. It's very, very efficient in doing that. So we'll be able to hit more of our catch basins on an annual basis to clean those out, which will improve the longevity of that infrastructure, as well as our water quality, which is a big part for the MS4 program to do that. So it also comes on the tail of, currently we use 2 pieces of equipment to do the same operation. We utilize our sweepers, our Tenco sweepers as a vac, because there's an option to do that. And then we have a separate water truck that goes along and does the jetting. The vac truck allows you to both jet and vac at the same time with one unit. So with the water truck that we have reaching the end of its useful life, it didn't make sense to us to spend a substantial amount of money to get another truck that just hauls water when we could use the combination of the 2. It is a very big ticket item, but I think the utilization will actually be excellent and will allow us to improve some of the services we already do. Along with that, our signed maintenance truck that we use to do traffic control also needs to be replaced. And we do have a older mechanical sweeper that's due to be replaced. So there's 4 or 5 pretty large items in there. Truck purchasing continues to be the biggest challenge in all of this. A lot of these other items I talked about, you can order and get. The trucks still have a multitude of issues. We just became aware of a potential piece of legislation recently that came out with some of the clean energy initiatives that could impact us even more. I don't have enough information right now to fully brief the board, but it might be something we're coming in front of with the obligations of dealers to have a certain amount of EV style vehicles, which unfortunately with the work we do don't exist. They don't currently have a product on the market that can plow snow and do the duration that we need, that we can purchase. And there's some legislation that has been presented to us that indicates some of the trucks that we currently buy may come through with titles that say they can't be registered anymore.
Another fine example of legislation getting in front of reality, unfortunately.
In our case, very directly.
Yes.
It's not a lack of a want to participate in an initiative.
Sure.
It's the physical impossibility,
Right.
which is really a much different situation. So we'll probably be back to discuss certain parts of that in the upcoming season.
I'm a little confused if I could interrupt, I'm sorry. In the detail, you have the Vector truck or sweeper at $350, but then note the Vector flush truck costs $475. So if you go the route of the $475 flush truck, you'll still be purchasing the $350 sweeper?
No, that's kind of a complicated situation. There is a couple of options I'm still working on. We have the opportunity to potentially utilize the used vac truck. I know there are some around,
Okay.
but it's whether or not we could facilitate something like that of taking one that's slightly used to be dramatically less. If we go with the full sweep, the full vac truck, which is the 475, we would utilize the CHIPS equipment line as well as the 350 for the sweeper, and the sweeper would move to a different year. If we're not able to facilitate, that would be if we get the used vac truck. So if we get the used vac truck at say $75,000 or $100,000, then we could also get the sweeper.
Okay. Before you buy a used vac truck, make sure you talk with everyone down at the sewer department and don't buy the same model as the one they had that we've put so much money into. We finally got it right, but we
I
don't
would
want to
love
go
to
through that again.
discuss that further. Yeah.
Yes.
Hopefully that's not the one that's up for sale.
No, it's not.
So that is a little bit complex like there. I'm glad you asked about it. If we do have to purchase a brand new vac truck, then we wouldn't do the sweeper.
Okay.
Then that would be the same, you get to the 475 and
Thank
350.
you. Thanks.
Yep, so that's a little complicated. Moving down through, another big item in that section is equipment repair and maintenance. We increased that a little bit because we used it up last year. I've spoke a lot here about our desire to bring the average age of our fleet down by continuing to purchase aggressively, as aggressive as possible. And we have continued to do that, but we haven't yet seen the fruit. We still have trucks that are 20 years old in the fleet. Our oldest one is 22, so another one is 20. So we haven't quite tipped the scales on that. I had an interesting conversation this week with another township in Monroe County asking me what the average age of our truck was. So I hadn't done that in a while, so I redid it. We're pretty close to 11 years as an average age. He had indicated that there's a couple of towns smaller than us who were actually currently achieving like a 7.5-year average. They've really gotten it down. My target is once we get to 15, we'll be in a lot better shape. If we could get to 10 someday, that would be amazing. I think that would really drive this number, almost cut it in half, this maintenance of $468,000. So it's definitely something that other townships are working toward doing, and I think on a smaller scale, able to do it faster than we are. The town that I talked to was Gates, so that their average is older than ours still, but they're trying to make moves, and everybody's sort of looking at what everyone else is doing to try to see if they're being unreasonable or not about the goals.
I think that our employees do far too good a job of maintaining these vehicles, because you would never guess how old they are by how they look. They just really do their best to keep them in shape.
Yep, it is a huge effort. They take a lot of pride in that. They do a fantastic job with it. So, yeah, it's hard to spot the 20-year-old truck, the 22-year-old truck, which is pretty great. It does help us when we go to resell those trucks. They do very well. It's great to see their work on fruition. People will go to an auction and ask where our equipment is.
Although, like anything else, you do get to the point where no matter how well maintained it is, a 20-year-old truck just doesn't have the resale value that a 12-year-old truck would have.
It's not all miles. We have some of these trucks that get up to like 15,000 engine hours and things of that nature. It really, there's not only so much you can do before a major repair is needed, and we're still having too many of those larger $10,000, $20,000 repairs that are just end of life of some of the components. Correct. So those are the big items in that section that kind of contribute to the increases there. Hop over to the revenue section that goes along with this fund. In general, we've kept these in line, except for the CHIPS line. I had talked about the CHIPS line for equipment and the adjustment of that. This year we adopted to have more money on it, and like I said, that's the line that aligns with the CHIP expense up above. So you see that we're taking the funds that we're given, and that's being spent in that line. It's a more direct correlation between what's coming in and what's going out. That's how that's covered. The rest of the stuff, we try to be as conservative as possible. We're still having good success with our partnership with the county, but the work does vary year to year quite a lot. So there's a couple of those that we made some adjustments. I think the one line, maybe for rental, or no, it was one of these is for parks. We had a big uptick for Monroe County Parks, sort of different IMA. The 1 or 2 years, I believe that was primarily ARPA funds, so that has slowed way down. So we've made those adjustments to make sure that we don't have unrealistic revenues in here. That's another great partnership where we get to be working with Webster Park and things like that that benefit our residents and generate some revenue for the taxpayers. But we try to be as conservative as possible in this section.
Best to be conservative.
Yeah.
I've also included a $500,000 transfer from the Highway Part-Time Fund, which compensates the Highway Town Fund the use of their equipment on jobs. It's just something we've been doing for a few years now.
Yeah, that's an interesting situation. Paul's been asking me for some real-time data to track if that's appropriate. I was able to put something together this year with the number of hours of what's used on different things, and basically what it comes down to is a very high percentage of the equipment hours. What the equipment is working on is actually in the other fund that receives it, and all 100% of the equipment expenses in this fund. So that transfer, when you're only doing 20% of the expense of the work in the account that receives 100% of the cost, there's definitely an imbalance. That transfer is very, very justified.
I think, Paul, isn't that something you instituted when you first came on board?
Right?
Isn't that something that you had looked into and instituted when you first came on board, looking at the discrepancy amongst two funds?
Yes.
Yeah.
I checked with the New York State Office of the State Controller, and they felt it was justified. But yeah, hopefully at some point we'll have a little firmer documentation. That's what.
Yeah, we're starting.
They think the 500,000 is pretty darn close, if not conservative.
Correct. Yep. Next section is benefits.
We have a small Sarah bond that we're paying on some, we actually took a bond out for some equipment that was purchased a few years ago, so it's very short term. It matures in 2027, so a couple years to go on that one. I I actually budgeted employee benefits completely flat year to year, just based on actual history, which in the budget is sufficient, so.
Okay, that brings us
Part-time.
Parktown, so there's a couple of key things in here that have been adjusted, and you will see the same tracking of employee compensation. There's large parts of the employee effort in here, sick and vacation time, fuel. We feel that we've generally caught up with. We basically track that in the industry. Been significant increases in the last few years, but the last couple of years has been a lot more stable. The lines I'm talking about where we've made an adjustment are the general repairs material, which are general road repairs. One of the big ones, so it's our preventative maintenance program, which is the chip seal program. That is increasing, so we're essentially, there's nothing changing about the total amount in the fund, we're changing where it is. And what drives that is that guidance came out about the CHIPS program earlier this year, further defining what the CHIPS funding could be used for. And they put a life cycle aspect to it, saying any treatment that you're paying for, you can't pay for, even if the treatment lasts longer, you can't pay for it for 10 years, or any less than 10 years. So if we do work on a road and we use CHIPS funding, they're saying that you can't use CHIPS funding on that road, the name of that road, again for 10 years. And our CHIPS program is currently at an 8-year cycle. And we were primarily paying for the CHIPS seal program. This is going to get confusing because it's the CHIPS seal program, otherwise known as oil and stone, with the CHIPS funding. And so if we want to stay on an 8-year cycle, based on that guidance that came out, we can't continue to use that funding. So what we did was we shifted so that we will pay for the permanent repairs with the CHIPS funding. So our capital projects, our gutters, our paving, that types of stuff, we will utilize the CHIPS funding for that because we don't do that treatment on our roads every 10 years. We do it a lot longer than that when you would go, and that allows us to use the same amount of tax revenue and funding to fund our chip seal program, our oil and stone program, instead of the CHIPS money funding that program. So it's a little complicated. I feel like I'm not explaining it super great, but you'll see that line that changed by about $250,000, and then you'll see the road material chips. That's the 250 that's being shifted from the road material capital improvements line, which was 255, and now it's 60.
So we're just switching how we pay for these things.
Yep.
That's something that we would have paid for with the permanent improvements through the
Exactly.
budget. And we're just switching it up.
Yep, that's all it is a shift. It looks like a big change in these lines, but it's a shift of what money funds what to match the guidance and legislation that has come out about how often we can utilize the CHIPS funding on the roadways.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a little complicated. Other services have remained relatively the same amount of effort needed in there. Fall leaf pickup, we're showing a slight decrease there, and that is primarily in our tree removal and grinding front. We've been able to establish a beneficial relationship with a local company that will utilize any of the excess materials that we have, and they give us a reduced rate for grinding. So when we collect all the leaves in the fall, which is what this effort does, bring them back to our yard, stack them, they start to compost. Then we have to put them through a very large grinder to get them to really start to decompose and turn into the compost that we're able to offer back to the residents. That effort was starting to get up in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range. By working with this company, they will take some of the material that's raw in exchange for those services. So we've driven it back down to between 10 and 20,000 for that effort, which allows us to capture a little bit of a savings in an area where this is very labor intensive, and we know that labor goes up every year regularly. So we were able to make some gains there and drop that down ever so slightly. Snow and ice, pretty consistent. The intermunicipal contracts we have with the state and county to provide snow and ice on their roads have made some adjustments in the last few years to give us some increases. We haven't seen those come in yet, so we're not banking on them in a big way. We keep this line in line. We have had some light winters the last few years. I don't know if there's going to be adjustments made for that, but when it comes to budgeting, we can't take big adjustments, even if it was a light year the year before, because it's so inconsistent. And if we end up in a year that isn't light or becomes heavier than average, we kind of need to remain in the same position there to be able to handle that. It's not an optional service. We'll cut it off if it snows too much. So that's why that increases along the same lines for labor, basically, is the big change there. Services for other governments, we're doing a similar amount of that year over year. The big one there is the county road work. We have seen that, a healthy amount of that continue. This year we were able to work with them on Lake Road, a small portion of Clem. And it worked pretty well. It's improving those roads. It's good to be able to do work for them and generate revenue in the town.
Employee benefits, I've got budgeted pretty flat year, only up about 1% over about 2%. On the revenue side, we do budget sales tax revenue in the highway part-time fund. I dropped it by $104,000. That revenue actually shifted over to the general townwide fund, which helps pay for the debt service on the highway building project.
Which is greatly appreciated. It's good to be able to utilize some of those funds from that to help offset that.
Yeah.
It's coming along awesome down there. Then you see the transfer funds, right? That's when we were talking about. This is where it comes from, correct? So that's the transfer we talked about earlier. Then we operate in the drainage district, I believe. So this is a fund. This is the primary fund for our drainage efforts. And it still is the area where we have the longest waiting list. Most items that come in, it dominates our resident complaint section at the town, which is, it's not a good thing in any other sense than it's not potholes. So it's not roadway complaints that come in first. We have a lot of drainage issues, and it's not really related to the roadways. It's backyards, drainage conveyances. Even with the efforts we've made for ash tree removal, there's a lot of trees falling in creeks and things of that nature. We're out on a lot more calls with this. So it needs continued increased funding. We were able to do some of that this year, and this is the one that is funded by the drainage fee that comes up. And we've been in here quite a few times talking to the board about, started with the residential right sizing of the drainage district, which added 4,000 homes into the 11,000 or 12,000 that were there, which helps distribute the cost against all of our residents because it is for common drainage features. And this past year, we were able to reassess and define the commercial property portion of this. We put together the demographic for how the fee would be done through a large GIS effort to map all 400 properties that were actively commercial and assess the correct fee across those, which significantly increased the amount of units you see there at the beginning of the consolidated special drainage district. The number of units is 20,000 now.
Whereas last year, I think we were at about 15,000 something.
Yeah, exactly.
So substantially.
So it speaks a little bit to the lack of capture. We have been implementing that on new properties that have come through, but hadn't assessed it across all the properties across town. So even with this increase, we should be able to have a slight reduction in that fee on people's bills as far as the amount for the unit. So again, should have a very beneficial effect in giving us more ability to get out there and do more drainage maintenance work on ponds and waterways. That will improve the situation there and slightly reduce the typical household fee, which is 1 unit from what it was last year.
Yeah, I expect the rate to actually drop $1 or $2 year to year because there's so many more units.
and this is a section that, this is our department's arm of the MS4 program. We talked about GIS. They wanted to, they need to identify a lot of stuff. It's definitely gonna become a part of the maintenance we do to start tracking that stuff a little bit better, but the GIS stuff that's specifically looked for, there's some interesting things like interconnections. They want us to map every place that another municipality or township where their drainage crosses into our township. That's a big point of contention to understand if basically you're outside of your responsibilities, waters are contributing to poor water quality and what you're doing. The first step is to know where they are, map them so you can look at them in a storm. That was a little interesting, and it's going to be a big effort to go find those locations. The outfalls that they talked about, what we found is that we have a lot of ends of pipes marked, but not all of them discharge to a water body of the state, and they only care about the ones that actually go into a stream or wetland or something like that. So we have to go back and kind of differentiate between which pipes come out of a pond and go directly into a stream and which ones go into a conveyance, and then where that conveyance hits the stream is the actual valve that point. So there's kind of a lot of refinement of the base that we have in there that they're looking for. And then after that, it rolls into the public outreach portion where they want the public to be able to understand what the infrastructure is we have, what is the importance of the ponds. That's another one, locating the ponds. We track commercial ponds and require them to do annual inspections and maintenance, but they want those locations mapped. These are privately owned ponds, so it's not something we currently have on the maps, but they would prefer to know where all the privately owned ponds that we're sort of dictating the inspections on are. So things of that nature, and it is a fairly robust effort, especially in the field. And when we talk about staff and utilizing staff, some of what Keith was talking about with the outsourcing, we hope it's more like a one-time effort, a big push to get it in place, and then we can maintain with the staff we have. To add full-time employees that you want to keep for a duration to do something that should be one big lift isn't the right strategy, right? You want to, if it's not something that you need that effort on long-term, you don't want to take on that large expense of having full-time employees that aren't necessarily being fully utilized. So I think that's part of the driving factor behind some of the approach to getting these things done. It is a very big lift, but hopefully once that specific effort is done, the maintenance of it can be much more easily handled, maybe by some of the candidates that you described. So, any questions?
How's the project coming along?
Really good, really exciting. We're pouring floors. There's drywall in the building. I actually saw them hanging a couple of lights today. Drop ceiling. They're getting really close. So it's still tracking for an early delivery before the end of the year, usually in April. It's really cool to start to see some of the rooms take space, take shape. We're able to walk some of the staff through, and you can really start to feel what the spaces are going to be like. So I think there's a lot of genuine excitement about it. So we're in good shape as it goes with that. Still trying to make sure we can keep everything sharp, and we're getting into some of the details now. We have to talk about furniture, getting the internet turned on, and we talked about the electrical service, the gas services this week. So you're getting down to some of the stuff where they're really going to start to fire it up, and it's going to start to look like a place that we can work, which is very exciting. So it's all going really well. Hopefully we stay on that path, and going to be excited.
I'm excited to come down and see it.
Yeah, anytime.
Yes.
I missed John. He stopped by one day and took a look. Didn't get a chance to walk through it with you, but yeah, anytime.
I'll make an appointment with you.
Yeah,
Take a
sure.
chance.
That's it. Might have better success.
And any project that's coming in earlier than anticipated and under budget is always a wonderful.
Yeah, we're working toward it. We've got a really good team down there, and my staff has worked really hard on it. Everybody's just as particular with what we're doing in this, and has a thought for cost, just like they do with the trucks. They kind of approach it the same way. So it's great to see that being able to have input and bring this thing home in the most cost-effective way possible.
Thank you, Pat.
I don't have any questions, but I want to commend you on your thoughtful approach to budgeting. You're very cost conscious in what you're doing and looking at bringing the age of the vehicles down, the way you're thinking about new capital purchases and 2-for-1 with the pump truck versus jet and sweeper, and your creative problem solving around keeping the cost of tree removal low by working with vendor partners. And I think it's great that you're thinking out of the box to keep your department affordable. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Very nice work.
He's a pretty good numbers guy. He's a good numbers guy.
Yes, he is.
Huge compliment coming from this guy.
Fantastic.
He does some big ones.
I know best.
Fantastic.
And Paul, do we have any other wrap-up messages as we end our workshop budget presentation?
Yeah, well, that wraps up our budget workshops. I think the next action on the budget will be on September 5th. If there are any changes, they will be incorporated for that particular board meeting. And the board will pass a resolution to adopt the tentative budget, which makes it the preliminary budget, which will be subject to a public hearing, which as of right now is scheduled for October 17th. So, I think we have the budget pretty well set though at this point. I was able to do the actual tax cap calculation just 2 days ago, and we're under by about $5,000, so everything's looking pretty good.
Good. That's great. Thank you very
That's
much.
wonderful considering where it's from.
It was a rough year.
Nice work.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. That concludes the budget workshop portion of our meeting.